Human trafficking is coercing someone into labor or sexual activities against their will at any age and state. Globally, human trafficking is a $160 billion industry. Andi Buerger is the founder and chair of Voices Against Trafficking, a powerful collective force in the fight against human trafficking. Andi has her own story of survival of unspeakable childhood abuse and familial trafficking, and it's captured in her book, A Fragile Thread of Hope, One Open Survivor's Quest to Rescue. We're excited to have Andi Buerger on the show. First, Andi, thanks so much for coming on.
Well, hey, Jeff, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor, and thanks for being part of the solution and helping me get the message out.
Wow, and she even has a backdrop for Voices Against Trafficking. Look at her. She's on it.
Well, we have to have something back there, right?
Yeah. Well, what's happening? Human trafficking, it's been around forever. Is it greed and perversion that's driving it? What's going on now?
That is spot on. Well, we hear about the greed part, but there's also perversion. So in the early 60s, that's what happened to me. Every immediate family member and some extended family members basically trafficked me for 17 years, from 6 months old to 17 years old, before there ever was a term. Nobody in that era, culturally was talking about child abuse. You just didn't talk about those things. But it's real. It's not political. It's about human beings. And it was so bad, the torture and the other things that went on in my home, so to speak, that I was 5 years old the first time I tried to take my life.
Yeah, your story is incredible. Where were you growing up, Andi? Because you're in Oregon right now?
I'm in Oregon right now, but I grew up in the heart of LA. I was born in Inglewood, California, home of the original Lakers, and then Orange County, Southern California primarily.
You're in LA, but this isn't a small town, large town deal. No one's immune to this.
No, it isn't. Every 40 seconds, Jeff, in America, a child 18 years and under is abducted. That means they're taken or they're lured into something they think is safe, like a summer job or some kind of opportunity to get out of podunk, town. And so we have to be much more diligent as a collective community, which is why Voices Against Trafficking does so much for public awareness, prevention, education, and we have a lot of different tools in our tool belt to help the general public understand, one, this is real. Two, if you don't know what to do about it, please let us help you. And three, let's start taking back our children and the value of life and say, hey, enough is enough. Do we really want America to be known as the country that allows human trafficking?
Yeah, it's awful. You can go check out her website, Andi Buerger, BUERGER.com, or Voices Against Trafficking at voicesagainsttrafficking.com. Her book, A Fragile Thread of Hope, One Survivor's Quest to Rescue, is also out now. Well, we're hearing about it more with this open border, with everything that's going on in the United States right now. It obviously is probably getting worse.
Absolutely. When you have a free-for-all at any border, then you're going to have people that are coming across that are not necessarily John Q. citizen, upstanding person. We have criminals. We already know that. We've seen a lot of tragedy as a result of unchecked borders. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of children that still haven't been connected with any known family member in the U.S. And yet, where do they go? Especially if they don't speak their language. Who's checking them for medical issues? Who's educating them? How are they making money? So we know we have partners on the border that have shelters that are trying to save as many kids as possible, but it's simply too much. We don't have enough people vetting and monitoring, and instead of a 30-day processing time, they're being processed in 10 to 14 days, which means we're not really doing our job. I don't know where the compassion is in that, but we simply have too many coming over, and the kids are being sold anywhere from $3,000 to whatever the cartels and the predators can get for them.
Yeah. Wow. Well, we'll talk about parents here in a second, but more on your story. You started Beulah's Place. How did you, when did you start getting over this, Andi? Because, you dealt with this for 17 years of your life. It had to take years of counseling.
Well, yes, it did. It wasn't until later. So the last time my birth mother tried to kill me, I was 17. So it was not a childhood. It was not a teenagehood. I had no modeling. I was isolated and alienated, which is what predators do. Went to college, started seeing how other kids, other people lived, and tried to find some semblance of identity. So I had a great game face. I could fit in anywhere. No one ever knew what had happened to me. And then fast forward, I go to law school thinking I can save the world and kids that were like me, and only to find out that it wasn't really about justice. It's about money and power and who knows who. So went back to business, and then many years, so went to counseling after marrying an abuser, right? Shocker, but it happens for people that have been, victimized. Actually was more of a sexual predator himself, but didn't know that till much later. So through the divorce, through counseling, 3 years of weekly counseling, a lot of stuff was identified. A lot of things were, I found out that I could have needs and I could express wants and not have to be hurt for it. So from there, my desire was to help kids here, in this country that were like me, that had been hurt. Yeah. And then I did meet the most amazing human I've ever met, married him 23 years ago, and that's where Beulah's Place started. It was our desire to get kids off the street that had run from things that were worse than what they thought they'd find on the street, and we rescued over 300 plus kids in our area.
Wow. Go check Andi out, voicesagainsttrafficking.com, and also Andi Buerger, BUERGER.com. You can check her out. I mean, we get in our daily routine. Our kids are online playing games. I mean, there's so many different things that they're exposed to now, and it's probably so much easier that they can get roped into this. What should parents keep in mind with your kids?
Well, first of all, absolutely have a conversation. And I know it's hard to start these things. People are busy, but we can't afford not to anymore. So have an age-appropriate conversation. Hey, I'm not trying to police you. I'm trying to protect you. Let's talk about this as a family, because together we need to keep each other safe. So include them in the solutions or in the protection process. Second thing, have a code word for your family or for your kids that only you know, something generic. So if they did get abducted, snatched, or they feel uncomfortable and they're in trouble, they text that word, and drop what you're doing, go get your kid, and without judgment. We all make bad judgments. Maybe not you, Jeff. I'm sure you were a perfect child.
Oh, yes.
But we all make poor judgments, and the last thing a child or a young adult needs to hear is how stupid they were, how wrong they were. They need to know that no matter what has happened, that you are there to help them work it through. We always said we'll figure things out with the kids that we rescued, because that's the positive approach. But the other part of it is, look at the history. Look at what they're watching on their phone. Look at who they're communicating with on the computer, again, for safety purposes, not for snooping, but just find out who are these people you're talking to. Because we know that there are over 500,000 internet predators a day looking for your son, daughter, niece, nephew, sister, brother, every day.
Oh, and it's just getting worse. I mean, and as negative and as awful as the internet's getting. I was talking about earlier today. It's just, so you start Beulah's Place. When did Voices Against Trafficking come into play?
Well, due to the pandemic issues, and in Oregon, we didn't have state leadership that thought, youth centers were important. So we didn't have enough funding to continue. So we ended up dissolving. But before that happened, after 14 years of service, all volunteer, no employees, no salaries. After all those kids, Voices came out of that. And it was a way to have a broader reach. It didn't require a building or anything. And so basically expanded our tent pegs worldwide. And we have, in 4 years, we have created quite the human rights movement. We started in November 2019 on Capitol Hill. We had Congress members from both sides of the fence and 200 people there from Mexico, U.S., all kinds of influencers that said, hey, how about we work collectively as a powerful voice together, find out what works, what doesn't work, what we can do, what should be done, share that information, and together, create that force that will hopefully impact the awareness and action of all communities, in this nation and worldwide.
Yeah, internationally. Go and check it out. VoicesAgainstTrafficking.com. You can actually go and add your voice and name to their roster. Because, people are sitting here there in Wyoming, whatever. But you can actually make a difference. How can people make a difference, Andi?
Absolutely. Add your voice. If you don't have time, money, or you're not really sure about this whole thing, just put your name on the roster. It doesn't get publicized. We just want 1 million names that we can take to any legislator, any person of influence and say, we have 1 million names that say they want a solution to this. They want to stop human trafficking. And so that's one of the easy things. If you feel led, donate. We're a 501c3. $50 is a lifetime membership. It's not much. And then we have other things that we can do. We have books. We have magazines. Voices of Courage came out this year in a big way. So we also are putting out a music compilation that is produced by a multi-platinum selling Grammy award-nominated record producer, and we're going to be raising funds to create specific kinds of recovery houses in the U.S., and then also to put out 2 educational programs so that we can start vetting the issues, Jeff, as early as 5 years old. Can you imagine if you're in kindergarten and there's an easy way for peer-to-peer communication that will help identify hunger, homelessness, and abuse at an early age instead of waiting till they're teenagers or young adults?
Yeah, no, that would be pretty awesome. You mentioned this Voices of Courage. This is an ebook and audiobook that people can get for free, right?
No, this is the magazine.
This is a magazine. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Voices of Courage came out of the desire to honor everyday voices out there that are working to protect every human's rights, not just from trafficking, but from discrimination and other stuff. And so in this magazine, it's a hybrid. It's what I call the coffee table magazine. So we have incredibly inspirational stories. We have truth. We have hope. But it's not the kind of magazine you throw away at the salon or the barbershop. It's something that you use and you can and pass it around. So we have books now, the magazine, we do interviews like this, and we work constantly to provide speakers for anyone that needs help, needs training. So the Voices of Courage magazine, you can get that on voicesagainsttrafficking.com. And it's a great resource. It's a great read. If you're on the airplane, you can get it digitally. So that helps us pay the bills, so to speak, and continue to do active rescues and bring more tools to the table for the general public.
Yeah. How much resistance have you got? Have you felt any? Because, I bet you people have to be against you a little bit, or, people, the predators out there.
Oh, absolutely. It's amazing. In the early days of Beulah's Place, my husband and I had death threats. We had all kinds of stuff because small town, that can't happen here. And we know it does. The average predator does not look like what you see in the movies. Okay, yes. Are there some international predators? Of course. But the average predator looks like your dentist or the librarian or the school teacher, and we know that. As we get more and more elevated in this horrible transnational crime thing. But yes, so all of that put together, our drive is to reduce, human trafficking. We can't get rid of depraved nature, Jeff. That's just the way it is. It's a human element. But I can tell you this, we got a lot of kickback, and we're getting it now because we're called political, because we want to save human lives. It's not about right versus left. It's about right versus wrong, no matter where you live. Even if you don't understand the subject, you have got to be against human trafficking, against selling children, against selling youth, against selling organs of these children. It's just wrong.
Yeah, I don't get what's going on with people's ideas now, because after COVID, now we've got all these people coming into the country. This is only getting worse.
Absolutely. We are going to overtake drug trafficking as the number one criminal enterprise in the U.S. I'm not sure that's anything to be proud of.
No, that's not a good statistic at all. Your book, tell us a little bit about your book. Is it just your story? What can people find in it?
So in A Fragile Thread of Hope, one survivor's quest to rescue, that's a little bit more of my story so people understand, nothing graphic or gritty. And then we have 4 stories that are interwoven of 4 of the kids that we actually rescued off the streets. One was trafficked. The other 3 had other reasons for being there. All were sexually abused and violated. And so we want people to understand who these young folks are. Not all of them are runaways or rebellious teenagers. In fact, that's more of the small percentage. These are kids that are trying to survive. We've sent 12 through college. They've graduated. We have actually, my husband and I adopted one of the girls that we rescued off the street and became official parents in our 60s. So
wow.
There's a lot of good out there. And so that book tells more of the stories. The other book, Voices Against Trafficking, The Strength of Many Voices Speaking as One, that is a compilation project, and there are voices from the U.S., Canada, and Mexico in that book. Each has a small chapter in there, sharing perspectives, sharing, what's real, what isn't real, also giving hope, but also trying to create greater awareness about, hey, when you travel, here's an example of what happened. When you're doing this is what to look for. We also have helplines and hotlines in that book, and also tips for parents on how to prevent child abuse and the things that they can do to help protect their children.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's incredible. You have the free online forum. You had some events. Is there anything coming up? What can people look forward to?
Absolutely. We are about to release what I would call, because I'm a dinosaur, a 2 CD set of music from world touring artists, all different genres, and that's going to be a fundraiser so we can do some of those projects I mentioned and continue helping not only victims recover, giving them help, healing, and hope, but also increasing prevention, because the best way, Jeff, to get rid of human trafficking is to prevent it in the first place.
Yeah.
So that music, it's called Broken Treasures. You Hold the Key. Every time somebody purchases the CD, flash drive, or digital download on Friday, from Friday on, it is going to go to help us help victims and to do some of the things we've talked about. So that's one of the big things that's happening. And then next year, we're going to actually have our first official Voices of Courage Award Gala. So we're looking forward to a lot of different activities next year.
Nice. And what's one thing somebody could do? I mean, you mentioned it. Prevention is the biggest key.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things I would do right now is ask yourself, one, have I talked to anyone in leadership, whether it's the school board, whether it's the mayor, whether it's a state representative? How many times has someone called or reached out to find out, hey, what are you doing to keep kids safe in our area, especially larger areas? I mean, Wyoming's a big state.
Yeah.
There are a lot of places for predators to do a lot of damage. And so what we want to do is make sure, hey, find out what they've done to keep your community one of the communities where they don't tolerate that kind of thing, where they don't see it as political, where they see it as, a moral or a human duty to protect, other humans. And so if they can't show you, can't tell you, don't vote for them, don't support them. Demand that there's accountability, and also go to your own schools and go to your own social groups and start asking, why aren't we talking about this more? We may not think it's a problem, but apparently it is. I just heard somebody on the radio talk about it, right?
Yeah,
so
for sure.
we have to do our due diligence, Jeff, as adults, whether we're parents or not. We all know someone who's been hurt. We just may not recognize it. And for those who know someone that's being hurt, I found out decades later people suspected something, but they didn't want to embarrass anyone. They didn't want to bring anything up, so therefore, as a victim, I suffered. My last predator just died 3 years ago, and she was 91 years old.
Oh.
So the victims have a life sentence. They live with it their entire life until predators are dead or locked up for good. And honestly, in my opinion, if you've been hurt that way, that predator does not deserve any consideration. Solitary confinement is fine with me because they have taken innocence and life out of somebody.
Yeah, exactly. Just like you said, you voted for them. You have the right to ask what they've done to make the community safer. And just like she said, we need more stringent punishments for assault and trafficking crimes because you're the 91-year-old lady. She probably nothing ever happened to her.
Right. No, got away. That was my birth mother. She was the orchestrator of all evil and a teacher. And so she was covered by bloodline and by what she did publicly, right? Not the private stuff. The other part of it, too, is that we have laws, Jeff. We just don't enforce them. Technically, federally, if you're charged with one count of trafficking, you can get up to 20 years per incident. State level, 5 to 8 years, which isn't enough. I mean, ask the victim. Ask the ones that self-medicate or take their lives because they can't live with the shame or the guilt. Exactly. I tried to take my life 3 times as a kid before I was even 12 because it was just that horrific. Yeah. And that was when she wasn't trying to kill me. So, it's a battle that unless you've been there or known someone, it's really hard to absorb. But I can tell you, all these years later, I'm so grateful to be here that God interceded in my life and that I can help intercede in others. But the other thing we need to do, listen more, talk less. If you know someone who's had domestic abuse or sexual assault or been trafficked, please don't try to tell them you understand or that you know what they're going through, because you probably haven't. But even if you have, we need to listen more so they can tell us what they feel comfortable telling us when they want to tell us that. Sometimes the best thing we can do, Jeff, is just sit there and listen and be there without having to ask a lot of questions. I still deal with PTSD, but I've had a lot of years of managing it and figuring out when I need to step back and take care of me a little bit better.
Wow. Incredible story. AndiBuerger.com, Buerger. She's at Andi J. Buerger on Instagram and on X. And also you can go check out voicesagainsttrafficking.com and her book, Fragile Thread of Hope, One Survivor's Quest to Rescue. Andi, thanks so much for coming on and educating us this morning.
Well, thank you, Jeff. It's been an honor. And again, truly, thank you for being part of the solution today.
Yeah. Andi Buerger. Go and check her out. It's KIX 96.5.